Good morning and welcome to the Mount Gretna School of Arts Summer Lecture Series hosted here in the Pennsylvania Chautauqua's Hall of Philosophy. I want to thank everyone for coming today. And I want to thank Stinson Strout for his support of our lecture series this summer and Purpose One for their season support. We're celebrating a lot this year. It's our 13th class of the Mount Gretna School of Art. If everyone can raise your hands, that everyone can feel your presence in the room. It's an exciting group this year. They're in the middle of their fourth week, so they have their big student show coming up this Sunday from 10:30 to 5 p.m. Our summer program it's a 7-week summer painting program. It's all about spending time outside and connecting with the nature of seeing and painting and drawing. That's a real pressure cooker for these students, college through graduate level, who compete to get in from across the country and internationally now. There's about 15 instructors and critics that come through. So they hear a lot of voices centered around a very niche-based focus, which is pretty cool. This lecture today is in conjunction with Gretna music, the Noche Flamenca, in keeping with Goya, the theme of Goya, who's very complex. He makes you feel great, and he makes you feel terrible. You don't know quite what he's trying to make you think. Unfortunately, we're setting up for our student show that evening, so you get to experience some Goya tragedy, so they can't go. Now, I'm not going to introduce myself, so I asked Heidi to do it.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name's Heidi Leitsky. I'm an artist and professor, and I'm married to Jay. So I get the pleasure of introducing him. So Jay Noble was raised in Indiana and Virginia. He went to undergrad at Anderson University, and then he studied graduate school, earning his Master of Fine Arts at American University in Washington, D.C. And kind of directly after grad school, went right on to teaching. He taught at Hollins University. He taught at Western Carolina University, Pennsylvania College of Art and Design, and York College, and has always really loved teaching art. And kind of landed through that path in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is where he lives and works now and has a studio and shows his art. If you've been lucky to see it, you might have found it at Gross McLeaf Gallery or Penn State Harrisburg. Jay and I met back in our days at Anderson University. Towards the end of my college career, I was getting ready to go to Chautauqua School of Art in the summer and paint with Stanley. And I asked my mom for a French easel. So she sent me a French easel for my birthday in April. And Jay and I had just kind of started hanging out. And I might have been like, oh, Jay, I don't know how to put up a French easel. Could you show me? So that was one of our first kind of encounters, painting and hanging out together. So I took that French easel to Chautauqua and painted outside. And through all this time, I've known Jay, and he's painting outside. And every time we drive anywhere, we pass an old barn or airplane hangar or any building, he would say, that would be a great building for an art school. So ever since he was like 24 or younger, he has always been talking about starting an art school. So perfectly timed, when we had a 1-year-old, he decided to finally start an art school. And you all are the beneficiaries of that Mount Gretna School of Art. So we're excited to hear what you have to say to Jay today, Jay. All right, so let's give Jay a round of applause.
I will say, after perhaps impressing her with my French easel setup skills, shortly thereafter, I was maybe showing off on the edge of the river and fell in over a 10-foot bank. She still wanted to hang out. Okay. Suzanne, I told the group the other night I was in the art museum and my phone notification was going off, and I'm usually the guy that scowls at anyone else in the museum, disturbing my meditation. As I scrambled to shut it off, I saw your note, and I don't usually think of myself as doing lectures here. This is my first lecture at Mount Gretna School of Art. We're try to put the spotlight on other visiting critics and stuff. So my first impulse was, oh, that's really great idea. And I tried to find someone else to do it for a while. And I wanted a certain type of person that would talk about it with some kind of special edge. And then after a while, I do this a lot. I go through this Jonah phase where I get the calling and then I search around desperately for someone else to do it. And then sometimes I end up doing it myself. So that's how this came about. And I will say that I'm not going to sugarcoat Goya. This is a heavy lecture. He's a very complex artist that is hard to pin down. He explored really every corner of human darkness. And I might give you, since there's some kids here, I might give you a little nod to cover their eyes and ears. And I think that's important. But he's not one-dimensional. He's hard to pin down. He slips right out of your fingers. You can't really cherry pick something from Goya and try to form any kind of clear judgment. And part of that is, maybe I knew that, but part of that is something I learned in the process of putting together this talk. I just want to thank Jessica Sponsler, who's my art history friend. I got really worried about some of the information, and she gave me a good rundown. And Henry for keeping me on track. Dad, you got to spend an hour a day. Dad, does your lecture have a point? What's the point? So that's it. Hard to pin down, all over the place. You're not going to leave here with you're going to feel terrible today, and you're going to feel better, and you're going to be confused. It's not a clean thing. So I just real quick want to go back to when I was, some of the things, I think these are almost universal in art school. Some of the things I remember just early on, the things that stick out in my memory, and very familiar themes from anyone who talks about Goya. This is the 3rd of May. It's something I remember probably everybody's graphic design teacher, foundations level, pulls out to show some sort of clear shape structure. You can see almost this triangular wedge moving in from the left side. And then they also get to talk about the humanity of the image. This is the title of the 3rd of May. There'd just been an uprising in Madrid, and they had driven out some Egyptian mercenaries that Napoleon or the French had hired. And the next day, of course, the French came in and, shot dead what they thought was peasants, but they didn't actually take time to check. They thought it would be okay to kill off some peasants, but ended up being mostly tradesmen and a few policemen. But pretty incredible painting. The French soldiers are kind of anonymous, looming in from the left, and the civilians are given all the humanity that Goya could load into them. The lamp, the yellow and white lamp, is it illuminating the man, or is he the source of it? And this is the range today that you're going to experience. This last summer, I went to the New York Studio School. I was 18, just after my freshman year, and I walk into the dean's office, Midwest kid, pretty conservative background, and above the Graham Nixon's desk is this painting. I was pretty scared, what's that about? Oh my gosh, where am I? And I remember asking somebody, what's with that painting behind Graham's desk? And this is Saturn, the god of melancholy and artists, devouring his children. The idea that they said was, this is a reminder for Graham when he's in the school not to feed off the students' creativity and energy. Just a tap on the back to have this guy looming over your shoulder when students come in. And I think, any teacher, we all slip into that sometimes, yeah, look what Connor's doing today. Yeah, the flip side of that is, we're sharing something we really love and believe in. And of course, as a red-blooded young man, this nude Maha loomed large in my imagination. This is one they always show when they introduce Goya's print sweep. The sleep of reason produces monsters. And they'll slip in a little art, a little history about the Enlightenment and the pushback against the nobility and the clergy. You got a man laying there with his pen. He spent a lot of time working out reasonable ways to go through life and structure society, but don't fall asleep. This is the only painting of mine you're gonna see. I was trying to think of was there a moment where Goya really interfaced with me? And it was really hard to think of something, but I did remember this painting from college. And it has something to do with, and I think Goya is this type of painter. Everybody throws the word empathy with him, like a deep sense of empathy for a wide range of what others are feeling. Part of that helped him be incredibly savvy as an artist, moving between the aristocracy and managing all the complexities of nobility. We've all seen those TV shows and how crazy they get. And then also for me, it was a kind of physical empathy. And this is a painting I didn't photograph it till yesterday. It was a strange painting for me. It began with this Cezanne artist's father reading. I'd spent many, many hours drawing from it. And we would get into these things where we'd do a drawing and then we'd do like a block print from the drawing. And each time it would get a little more messed up. And you'd start to see other types of imagery slip in, like subconsciously. I think for me, I was very in tune with my body, and in high school and middle school with sports and the wrestling team, and had spent like 2 years after college, straight from wrestling to being a student aide for a child with autism. And, just think about it. Every day you're like this with therapists telling you how to do and what to do because I was cheaper. So they would tell me what to do. You're just like this with another little child, like pushing things into his attention, slipping a cookie in there if something good happens. You know what I mean? Just all day long, like almost like kind of like a puppeteer of a kid. So that was deep in, like, I think rooted in my body in a big way. And I think over time that idea of this figure, without me even knowing about this Goya self-portrait, that the idea of that figure slipping in behind the person reading the paper. And then, of course, much later, running into this painting of Goya, who is on the other end of it, struggling with his health. And this is a portrait of his doctor who he loved. A warm, supportive relationship. You got the doctor kind of holding him up in bed, tipping his head back, giving him something to drink. There are some murky faces in the background. I think through sickness also, you become super aware of your body and it's what it can do or barely do. And the idea of Goya's empathy or in the painting being held by the man, and then just a flashback to this old painting. This is more like an amusement, popular amusement or a popular story at the time. This El Marigato, or pardon my pronunciation, had escaped from prison, the guy on the left, and was going around robbing people. But this is him threatening the Friar Pedro with his gun. And check out those guys in the back. They're just seeing what's happening. The red shirt, there's 5 men there. And this is Friar Pedro, sleight of hand. He pulls out a pair of shoes and slips up his right hand. You see this? This is the closest thing I could find to dance choreography too, which was also spooky in Goya's work. Friar Pedro grabs the gun, drops the shoes, and wrestles the gun from Marigato. And of course, he clubs him, knocks him out. And this would have been hilarious to people thinking of the humble monk moving along. And then the monk shows great self-control. And instead of shooting him to death, wounds him in the rear. And then, of course, the guys come back once he's tied up to help. So this was something Goya did for his own amusement. it's not something he really put out there for maybe for his family to enjoy. I don't know. One thing I got interested in were the self-portraits over the decades of Goya. This is kind of age 29. I'm just like looking at that face. He was lucky. He grew up with like craftspeople all around him, and his family was gilders. And then he spent his early teenage years copying stamps. And then he kind of, I want to make my own art. And if any young artist from Spain or France that was interested in and had some talent, that you didn't go to college, they would send him off to Rome to go wild and look at art and copy stuff. He had side jobs to kind of help pay for his time there. But this is him hot off the return from Rome. He's muscled up with Italian painting, and he's ready to impress the wealthy aristocracy in Spain. This is him, decade later, getting a little more cavalier. He's dressed as a El Toreador. He's like, it's the equivalent of like a hot biker jacket. He was trying to get jobs with wealthy ladies that appreciated a thrill now and then. And, he had plenty of trysts as a side hustle to his painting gig. And then it takes a left turn. He has some mysterious illness, badly ill. They're not quite sure what it was. And he lost all of his senses. And then they came back except for his hearing. So this painting is right after that. You see a different kind of frailty, and maybe a kind of harshness or grumpiness has settled in. And he's trying to claw his way back because he's a famous, powerful painter in Spain for like 40 years. He had a great career. He knew how to sell a painting to a wealthy person and please their tastes. These two portraits, I think, are interesting. He's putting himself back together, he's gaining some weight. He's a little more self-conscious about how he's presenting himself with the glasses. And here he is, age 69, more vulnerable. I think France had occupied Spain for a while, so he wasn't getting as much work. And there he is towards the end of and all his life at age 75 with his doctor. Just that kind of span of time, I think, is fascinating to me, thinking about the span of an artist's career. All right, this fella, he's got his first big painting gig, maybe not first, for the future Charles IV of Spain, doing some of these cartoons for their palace or their bedroom. These are doughy, soft, incredibly, for me, kind of, especially in the context of the arc of Goya's work, silly paintings for wealthy people that don't want to have to think about their complicity in the harm that they're causing in society, or maybe they're being kept in the dark. They were designs for tapestry, or actually insulation again, this is another one of those cartoons. A couple of wealthy people, totally oblivious, creating some kind of like cocoon of privilege and peace and not a care in the world. Boys playing as soldiers. Don't have to really think about the cost of our wars. Let's just decorate the house with some cute boys drumming. See, it's not so bad. Kind of making a mockery of the everyday peasant or the working class. These were kind of popular and Goya's complicit. He's excited. He writes his friend about how happy he is he's getting this work, and that the aristocracy, I'm not sure I'm using the right term there, but the wealthy elites want his work. But these were popular. These were paintings more for people to snicker at. Look at the peasants having a brawl fight outside the inn. You got a guy in a red shirt on the left biting a man in blue's arm. And there's the proprietress of the bar is coming out dismayed. And then they could think about how, well, of course, this isn't how we would handle things. but he painted a few of these, so that he must have had a good run. Now, come on, can you imagine the working conditions of men who cut down trees and did labor at the time? This was not it. And this is the tail end of that, age 39. He's rocking it. And this is a painting that comes up a lot. The idealistic vision of the aristocracy having a lovely day at the park. And this is the world that Goya really, he really wanted to be a part of. But there was something else brewing. Like, he was noticing some problems with this whole situation. And to just kind of drive home the point of the art, this is 1788 compared to a painting below that was done not for a client, just done for himself. Very similar situation from this bucolic wealthy elite picnic to something that he didn't title it. It could be a procession. The people here are very ghoulish. It could also be the misery of refugees being driven out of Spain through the Inquisition. I think with Goya, you can kind of go to multiple places, and just the physicality and dirtiness and cruddiness compared to the superficial world above. Goya gets sick, he's clawing his way back. Duchess of Alba painting, I guess the most popular sexy woman in Spain that everyone wrote poems about. Visiting dignitaries would fawn over and write letters about her beauty. This is a painting of a old guy fantasizing about a woman 20 years younger than him that he doesn't have a chance with. I know there's some speculation that they did get together, but I think it was more like she was probably just kind of fascinated by him. The two rings, it says, Goya and the Duchess together, and then the scratched on the ground is only Goya. This is not the Duchess of Alba standing there like this, scratching only Goya. She might not have ever even seen this painting. This was just a painting for a middle-aged man to just sort of have at his house. The painting of Charles that he did at the same time. This is one of those elites that we showed before, and it's complicated because you can say he destroyed Spain. It was made a lot of stupid decisions, but at the same time, I think he didn't want to have anything to do with it, and that maybe Goya had some kind of affection for him. Look at his face, just a kind, gentle, oblivious thing. He doesn't really want to be responsible for everything Spain's committing around the world, but he's happily oblivious. And I think Goya's name is subtly worked into the dog's collar. Goya is the loyal, obedient, doesn't matter what the king is or what he does, if he's responsible or not, the dog's going to love him. This is the family. When I was talking to Jessica, she said by this time, they wanted to keep the family blood together. So there's lots of inbreeding, uncles and nieces, and they become stupider over time. Charles, the fellow on the right, really doesn't want to make decisions and has his wife standing center. And, she anchors the painting. It's kind of a subtle feminist nod, in my opinion. She anchors the picture, she's making the decisions, she's keeping the family together. And I'm getting some of this from Robert Hughes, which I really love how he talks about it. Writers love to talk about this as Goya making fun of the royal family, because they just look like a bunch of silly, superficial, dotty people standing around, and there's Goya in the back looking cool. But they would have had a chance to review every portrait, all the preparatory studies, and they liked it. They liked it. the nude Maha, painted for a man during the, I'm gonna forget his name. He was a Duke of Spain for a while, and as France was coming in and occupying Spain, he like joined forces and with the support of Spain went after. So Goya was trying to find work at this time, which was a little tricky, and did this painting for this Duke. And I will add, both the Duke and this family, they were just astonishingly wealthy. Gold was pouring in from South America. Can you imagine the human cost of that gold landing on their steps? They were just like totally oblivious to what was going on. There was this idea of, you didn't want to work or use your hands. It was crazy stuff. And then through the Inquisition had driven out their middle class Jews and Muslims. And Goya starts to pick up on this kind of stuff, and it's gnawing at him. But he also knows how to play the game. He knows how to make paintings. He's a wealthy guy. And this was, a painting for a man who probably his mistress. And then he's like, Goya, the wife, that painting was really getting under her skin. After 4 years, I told her you're going to put clothes on the nude. But don't worry, I'm going to secretly keep the other painting behind it so that when she's gone, my friends come over, I'll take it off. And it's kind of like man cave situation. My feminist art historian teacher in grad school, Mary Garrett, she said, as silly and stupid as this is, it was just like this, kind of recessed in the wall, and this in front. As soon as you say naughty, naughty Goya, he depicts a woman, working class woman, standing proud. It's almost an Egyptian ground plane with the feet like that at the bottom. You're not looking down, you're looking up at someone, almost as if you're a child's view of his mother. The strength of her pose, the musculature. And I think for Goya, he was fascinated by everything he saw in his depiction of women was constant and not one-dimensional. This is 1812, it's 1815. He's 69. He probably painted this for himself. If you've got kids, you want to cover their eyes. He does a series called Disasters of War, kind of like taking in all the horrors of what Spain is, what people he works for is committing on the people. There had been like this overthrow of the French Revolution, destroyed their monarchy. So there was some people in Spain going, oh, what if that might not be such a bad idea? And then Goya is equally disappointed with what the French did as they ravaged Spain. So I'm going to send this your way, but this is violent, ugly stuff. Rape, torture, carrying bodies to the grave, a man being kind of strung up for walking around with a knife. Maybe he got searched and they just assumed. And the clergy, the idea of the clergy during wartime, walking a tightrope, the rope's about to break between, support for the war and caring for the people. And he didn't print this or anything. This was for himself. This was for this guy. What a humble, vulnerable self-portrait. He's not trying to play up to the aristocracy here. He's starting to feel the full swing of, I've been thinking about this one too. Whether or not I believe what I was told, it's just too clean for Goya that this is some sort of, as if reason could solve our problems, or a comment on if you let go of the hard work of reason, monstrous things will happen. And that word in Spanish for sleep is also very readily interchanged with the word dream, the dream of reason. Like maybe you don't see monsters unless you can reason. And these are some prints that he made. Like, one on the left is Disasters of War, which he didn't print. It was pretty much for himself. Where's Mom going? The one on the right is the Caprichas, which he did try to print. And caprichas were like jokes on the clergy and the ruling class and people in general, little morality quips. And in Great Britain, there was a law protecting political cartoons, and they're brutal and straightforward. Like they name the politicians and the different people in power in Great Britain. And I think that Goya was kind of like, need some money. What if I could start a Spanish version of this? And his friend's like, oh, no, we've got the Inquisition. The people in power are regularly taking out and executing or driving people out of the country that they're suspicious of. And Goya's like, well, okay, well, maybe I could do it just subtle enough so that it's not like I won't get in trouble. Because he's so socially savvy, he's kind of like able to say one thing to one person about the image and it's true, and he knows how to say something to the next person. I think that's what's going on in his mind. But little elves, it's like a reference to the clergy. Long fingers, they're thieves, ghouls, more clergy. Nobody has seen us. These ghoulish faces, getting drunk together and then yawning, okay, time to go to work, and then hanging their clothes on a scarecrow. See what a tailor can do? All you have to do is put on that outfit and you get looked up to. Or is it the stupidity of the people there? It can be a bunch of different things at the same time. Images of women as prostitutes plucking their clients. And then Goya sees the flip side of it. The clients, how they pluck her. Jokes. They already have a seat, or they're thinking with their asses. The humanity of a young woman who was, I guess I'm interpreting this, is what did she do? Why was that worth tossing her into the gulag, tossing her out on the street? More images of women. This one's interesting. The worst is to beg. So you've got on the left the woman who's like got clothes and well dressed, sauntering off to meet a man that's hiring her, and then the dignity of or the pain of people, or maybe there's some in the preparatory drawing. There actually is a woman off to the right that's starving to keep her dignity. The worst is to beg. Perfect for each other. Another prostitution moment. The idea of the governesses that were given charge of the young women to keep them from getting into trouble. But there's a clear undercurrent that maybe the governesses were actually the pimps, and maybe the two that are perfect for each other are the two governesses back there counting their cut. Motherhood. I almost slipped another. I deleted it because I thought it would just burn our brains out, but this happened recently in New York City. A woman was picked up by mistake by the police and ICE. She's like, ouch, this is hurting. As soon as the pain subsides, my daughter's here. My daughter's here. No, my daughter. And then they lock eyes, and then you can see the little girl on Times Square. They were just there to enjoy Times Square for the day. The little girl crying in the background. Goya would have appreciated one of the images because you can tell one of the cops is not happy about what's happening either. They're like working it over in their heads. Early in his career, a pleasure game for young women. He was probably earnestly proud of creating something that these wealthy people would love. And this is very late. We're talking, he might have died soon after 1824. a similar image where the women are, it's a little more brutal looking. Those bodies flying in the air might not be dolls. Women as tough defenders, taking out a well-trained French soldier, fearless. Another woman grabbing a rock, woman dying on the ground after having probably killed 4 or 5 of those guys. You know, the range there of like how he's seeing women. What courage. You know, when the men can't handle it, a woman steps up. And, you know, this is a picture of the guy that was able to see that. And there's hordes more images of this stuff. I did cut out a lot. And this is the same guy who, you know, he's painting these for himself. It's a big time of upheaval. It spans many years, but, you know, he does need some money. So he does ask after the get expelled from his area to do a commemorative painting. So this is the age he is when he's doing this. On the one hand, you know, clawing his way back, figuring out what he can make some change from. And then this painting was used by Spain to rally support to further push Napoleon or the French out. The painting's 1814, but the 3rd of May, the event was. And this comes up later. I want you to think about this painting too. This is a painting that he did for himself. In the midst of all that shocking darkness of humanity and war, few people can do that. Few artists can stare into that kind of ugliness and keep producing. In the midst of all that, there's this gentle, tender, loving painting of his grandson. There were incredible infant mortality at this time. I think Goya's wife was pregnant 20 times for one kid. There's stories of just bodies of babies being tossed into the dump. If they weren't even a little bit sick or deformed, they knew not to waste their time and, you know, try again. So this is the grandson. Can you imagine? Now we're rolling up on late career stuff, 1820. Back to this time period, really struggling with his health. There's periods of time when he just drops out. We don't know what he's doing. And these are some paintings he was doing, you know, in his house. He's painting these for nobody. He knows full well. He knew full well when he made the Disasters of War that nobody would want that. And he was a little nervous about the Capricos. In fact, some people started to pick up on some of the critique of the aristocracy, you know, and he had got a little nervous. He ends up giving the plates and everything to the king just in case, you know. But that idea of doing paintings for yourself, that you're totally free of the client and what they might want. We know these were painted on directly on the walls of his house. It wasn't something that he ever thought he could take off and put in a gallery or move to someone else's home, you know. These are paintings that probably, I can imagine the conversation. Little Mariana and Mariana's dad and Mariana's mom's like, what about grandpa? How can we send him? We can't send little Mariano over there anymore. We're kind of like getting worried. You know, this is in the dining room. What are we going to do? You know, it's horrifying. And it was more horrifying. Kind of a suggestion of a dog's head coming in across his groin, that either Goya or the people who chipped this out of the wall and transferred it to the Prado painted over his genitalia. This is kind of where things were hanging, which is kind of interesting. You can see that Saturn eating his children on one end of the wall, and on the other end, beautiful Maha dressed in funerary garb. The contrasts of that, pretty huge. Which way did he face when he ate dinner? These were side by side, you know, Saturn on the one side. And it's probably, these things were badly damaged. They literally hacked them out of the plaster wall and then tried to somehow get the paint onto a canvas. So some of these things were kind of clumsily repainted. Or, you know, on the right, you have this image of a woman with agency, got a knife. he didn't title these things, which is why I didn't put titles on this last bunch, but it does remind a lot of people of the Holofernes tale, which is like a story of kind of female empowerment over the man, with all that women have suffered. These images of old ones eating soup, and they were kind of hung similarly too. These two old fellows, one whispering in the other ear. I'm not sure what this means. I don't think we're supposed to have a clean understanding either. This is in the dining room. This like haunting painting of a dog. It's not my word, but it's just an incredible image of pathos and the open space. Is the dog drowning? I think there's some suggestion of a figure that may have been rubbed out. And maybe Goya, after some frustration, found that even more haunting and sympathetic. These were kind of hanging on either side of the door. What an artist chooses to paint when no one's looking. Do you have work that you're not going to pull out for me or your teachers, or nervously look for anyone else's approval for? This is probably an image of refugees being forced marched out of town. Imagery of witches and sorcerers was pretty common in Goya's work. Vicious little characters upstairs on the wall. It's like two men locked in place. They're cursed to forever. They're too close to get away from each other, but the only thing their curse is to perpetually fight. And the kind of parallel to any two countries that are, or factions that are landlocked next to each other, cursed to fight perpetually. And this is what Goya is choosing to paint. It's why little Mariano is not allowed to come over anymore. Look at the ghoulish faces. Also in the dining room. I included the lower one because of the use of open space for our students. So just whoever chipped it out didn't think, oh, we don't need that part of it. Look, there's nothing there, but the point is, it's just better with that space off to the right. And I kind of foreshadowed this earlier, that the figures look like they're about, if they got too close, they might eat you, like, literally like ghouls. Or are they, the flip side of that, maybe they're just so miserable. And the fellow with the guitar is just grasping at some sense of kind of encouraging the people behind him to escape some sort of horror. Or is this really what he thinks of all those people on that meadow earlier on in his life? Now, his doctor is getting a little worried. He's like, Goya, I don't think you can do this anymore. It's gotten even worse in Spain. This Ferdinand fellow, which was this toad of an impetuous prince, took, after Spain pushed France out, something even worse. He came in with a kind of xenophobic suspicion of everyone. He's a little suspicious of Goya. He rousted that fella who hired the Goya to do that nude earlier because he had been a turncoat, and found the painting, of course, and because that wasn't like a real pure Catholic thing. He became very little suspicious of Goya, but maybe they left him alone because he was so sick. And the doctor, his good friend, is just like, Goya, you got to find something. I really wanted the lecture to end here, just in darkness and misery. And, in Mount Gretna, we've created this place where we can be sort of clueless about the human suffering around us. You know what I mean? We see it on the news, but we don't really see it. And I wanted it to end there. But I learned something, this little fella. So he convinces the Ferdinand to let him go to Bordeaux, where the water's clean and the relaxing atmosphere in France, and recuperate, right? But of course, it's just a ploy to stay there and enjoy something at the end. The doctor's like, you've only got a few years. So he goes and produces a series of bullfight paintings. He loved the sport and some prints that went along with it. He paints one final painting of a beautiful woman. Mariano's a little older. The family's not so worried about him anymore, but I can just imagine him reconnecting with his grandson. This is the last painting. And then he dies the next year, and this grandson is the one that must have been checking in on him every day, that took the report to the local government. That's it.
When you think of some of those notes by Goya, did anything jump out in looking at what you read that are governments?
Any artists that were big influenced by Goya? I think Leon Golub, Kath Kalowitz did lots of very human, bare bones paintings. I don't know if she actually thinks this, but he's somebody that couldn't help but paint it, even as he saw the different facets or different sympathies. Judy Glansman's paintings just feel very physical, and that like there's as much human body in there as there is visual relationships.
Yes, I'd like to know what kind of recompense he got for his paintings from the rich people.
What kind of money did he make?
Yeah.
Oh, he was rolling. He was making 15,000 whatever, which was a big deal. He bragged about his cart. He had enough money to just sit around in his house and educate his son and make paintings for nobody, and make fun of the people he had been purchasing paintings from in secret. Every once in a while, he did have to get back in there and make some money.
He said this, but when he was making paintings that like catered to the art world at the time, and then he had like these private paintings that were like
I'll repeat it.
like more gruesome, where he's like processing certain things. Would you say that he kept making those art market paintings, or he like stopped doing that and then just made dark stuff?
He would jump back in and out, and I think there's this kind of history timeline which isn't quite clean. They kind of clean it up, but he's doing gentle paintings of his son, but he's realizing, oh, I need to make money. He asks to do the 3rd of May and another painting of the battle. You know what I mean, for the aristocracy. He's kind of jumping in and out. Those bull paintings were popular. People wanted those things, bullfight paintings. I think he's jumping in and out. Although I think it probably ebbs and flows, and he gets better. Like those last paintings are pretty great.
Jay, that was wonderful. It was fascinating. It's made me want to look at more of Goya's work. And I hadn't realized you had such an incredible sense of humor. So that was great too. His grandson echoes the one of him. What you showed us earlier, I think he was he was 27, but his grandson looked so pure, whereas he looked pretty dissolute at the age of 27.
Right.
And I was thinking too, in terms of his illness, did he have syphilis? Was he descending into madness, or did he have those?
No, not at all. Not madness at all. I've been given the license to push back against that idea, especially with Goya, that somehow for an artist to conjure up images like that, they must be on drugs or they're crazy, you know. But I see an artist who's in total control, understands exactly what he's doing, and he can move into the darkness and right back out. I'm not going to say it didn't wear on him, especially with the health and the, like any of us that looks. I got a friend that has to go into terrible humanitarian situations where they're asking for money just to check and make sure it's actually happening so that there's not some corrupt story going on. Some artists are able to carry a lot of pain and come out the other side.
One last, I noticed that the figure, in the third main painting, wearing a white shirt and gold breeches, he appears, that same costume appears in that poetic series between the monk and the thief. The same he was wearing a white shirt and gold breeches down.
Oh, that's good. I wondered who this El Marigato guy was. You know, there's all these apologetic reversals of the story. Maybe he would, you know, the bandit escaped from jail, you know, this kind of stuff. But maybe he was a Robin Hood type figure or a sympathetic figure, or maybe that was Goya later in life taking a nod to this Arigato fella. You know what I mean?
In Goya's nude, do you think Monet might have used that idea for his Olympia?
Yeah, it foreshadows. I learned there wasn't many nudes in Spanish painting history. That's practically the only one because of how conservative the Inquisition was. And but it did kind of foreshadow some of that Olympia stuff. It had to have been in the popular imagination by the time Manet came around.
He plumbed some of the darkness of the light. His final outlook was a little comedy on a full set based on Shakespeare's play. So I think that there's maybe a similarity there in terms of where you ended for it.
Yeah, or kind of like a rebound. Like you can only push the space of the picture plane so far back before something else in the picture plane recoils and kicks back towards the viewer. So it probably happens with artists that deal with subject matter. I think I can say that about Goya, that it really is, he's really jumping between ways of depicting people, non one-dimensional ways.
He seemed like an illustrator who did great detail, so he reminds me of Norman Rockwell, except why did he have a dark, what influences darkness?
I think that's a fair point, Norman Rockwell, because some of his stuff does veer on a kind of quick shorthand, you know, illustrations of expressions on people's faces and stuff. Yes. I think just a sense of justice and humanity that he had. He knew the empathy thing, he knew how to feel the world from other people's points of view. Helped him with his business in terms of, he couldn't turn it off when he saw someone suffering on the streets or heard stories. Back then, they would end up in an asylum. He kept it under control through painting.
Character Gilbert or whatever, what do they think kind of influences, going to the dark side?
Oh, like what kind of paintings would he have seen that kind of jumped his, gosh, I don't know. I bet there's scholars that have written all about this. Like, did it come out of the blue, or I know he was looking at those British cartoons and kind of envying, like, what if there could be a social critique among the common people in printmaking form that they could maybe afford, or at least the working class, you know what I mean, that could help change how my Spanish leaders are acting, and then, it didn't work out, but yeah, I don't know what was the ugliest painting. Maybe he saw some in Rome that The Italian painters didn't hold back. I'm sure there's some horrifying paintings of brutality and ghouls and nudes and everything and maybe it's something he held on to from his youth. I think I'm going to end on one thing and then I'll stop. I think with Goya, and I really am impressed with his ability to, I think we think we're one thing and we think other people are another thing, but he seems to have had this capacity to, like, I was trying to think, what if I said it? I was like, we are privileged, insulated Mount Gretnans. We are art students here for the first time, totally bewildered. We are rushing towards food and getting shot down. We are afraid of that crowd coming toward us and have to stop it. We are holding children like mothers. We're fighting back. We're hypocrites. We're complicit. I mean, it's impossible to move down the street and buy anything without contributing real suffering. Cobalt blue. I got a big lecture about cobalt blue last year from somebody because of the way cobalt mining in Africa is causing incredible suffering because of the cell phones we look at every day. But then Goya, my tendency is to slide towards the dark side, but my new friend Neil, who came and I got to know more this week, it's like somehow he's able to feel the full scope of things. That's it.